that part of. All right. So without further ado, I want to introduce Lee.
All right. Thank you, Glenn. Good afternoon, group. My name is Lee, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm understanding I'm in Tennessee now, and I'm visiting you all from Washington, D.C. I'm a member of the Cosmopolitan Group of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we meet live Mondays and Fridays at 8 p.m. And the group still meets on Zoom Tuesday, well, every day, Monday through Friday. But the live meeting, those that just decided that we want to come back, that's Monday and Friday. The group location is 7750 16th Street Northwest here in Washington, D.C. And we're really kind of growing back to how we were pre-pandemic or COVID. Excuse me. The way we do it here in D.C., I'm supposed to tell you a little bit of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And that would include our stories disclosed in a general way. And the reason I think Bill wrote in a general way is because back then, as in now, we're not asking anybody to embarrass themselves, especially in this format. Ladies and gentlemen, the last drink I had was on a Saturday morning, March the 5th, 1976. I have not had a drink from that day to this, and I've been attending AA meetings from that day to this. And I had no idea about Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I said no idea, what I'm really talking about is from the time I was 15 to 30, what Bill describes as progression. Two things were progressing in me: my alcoholism, that's located in my mind, and my drinking, which increased as I got older and older. And then there was this other piece that I want to make sure you all don't miss this. Along with the mental progression and the physical progression, there was also the association progression. And I can look back and see how different then versus now, or now versus then. And it seems to me that from the time I started drinking at 15 years old, over the next 15 years of my life, somehow or another, I kept meeting people that drank. And the older I got, it seemed I kept meeting, not only did I meet people that drank, but they knew people that drank. So my network of people, it just kept growing. And so did the places I would drink at. I'm one of the kinds of drinkers that never spend a lot of time in bars. Most of my drinking was in the back. It's in the back seat of a car on a liquor store parking lot. It was where I worked at, or it was in someone's home. That's where most of my drinking happened. So I get out of high school, and I graduated. I got a diploma in June of 1963. In October, one of the guys that in my neighborhood, the oldest guy, his name was Martin. Uh, we all went down to the Navy Yard and took the test. And at 17 years old, in October of 1963, I got lucky and passed the test. But because I was 17, I needed parental consent, and my dad signed the paper, and I ended up in the United States Navy. That was in 63. And in 65, I was shipped off to Vietnam. I kept meeting people that drank like I drank. And it didn't matter what kind of trouble I got in. I just didn't want to stop. I didn't want to stop drinking because of what I was going through. So I just kept it up. I just kept meeting people that drank. I kept meeting people that drank, and I enjoyed it. By the time I reached AA, ladies and gentlemen, I had stopped bathing and changing clothes. My life was just a mess. but I couldn't see it as a mess because that's how I was living. I couldn't see it because I was in it. It's just like the insanity that Bill describes in our basic text. You can't see it till you're out of it. And because I was in it, I couldn't see it. Well, a series of events eventually got me to Alcoholics Anonymous. And that just simply means I met a lady, non-alcoholic lady named Carol, and she knew a man named John who had gotten sober. And she was really impressed because she knew him before and she saw him after, and she was really impressed. And she asked him to help me. And that's how I got to AA. I didn't come here on my own. I never wanted to stop drinking. And it didn't matter what kind of trouble I got in because my drinking people would always convince me that it wasn't my fault. It was the police, the supervisor, the baby mom, somebody, but it wasn't my fault. And it certainly wasn't my drinking. Well, now I met you all, not in relationships, just in being in the same room with you. And I looked around the room, ladies and gentlemen, and I didn't see anyone that I knew. I didn't see anything or anybody that I recognized. And at that very first meeting, I listened to the people talk. And for the life of me, I couldn't understand what they were saying or why they were saying it. Now, mind you, the last drink I remember swallowing came out of a bottle of Dewar's White Label Scotch. And it was either a fifth or a quart bottle. I haven't had a drink since then. So I wanted you to know that because I wasn't fall down drunk at my first meeting, but I had almost a fifth of liquor in my system. And I think that had something to do with why I couldn't hear or understand what y'all was saying. But I've been coming back to these meetings ever since that first day. And I've been watching y'all. And I've been trying to understand by listening to you, what did it have to do with me? Now, for a very long time in my AA experience, I'd never heard the phrase self-centered. Never heard that before. I heard self-pity before, but I never heard self-centered. I'd heard selfish before, but I never heard self-righteous. So when I would hear you all use those words, I was just baffled and confused as to what they meant and what it had to do with me. But I kept coming. And it wasn't too long as a result of not drinking and coming to meetings that I realized that my life had changed. And a lot of the things that happened because of the don't drink and go to meetings, I liked some of the changes. And some of the changes, very briefly, as I started to I started to take baths and change clothes and get haircuts and shave, all that stuff I wasn't doing at the end. And then I realized I had money. I used to work for the post office and we would get paid every 2 weeks, paper checks. And the group that I drank with, we would take our checks to the liquor store. That became my bank, although I didn't know to call it a bank. But we would sign the check and stick it in the window, tell the person what we wanted. I want a fifth of this and a fifth of that and that kind of thing. And then after few minutes, they would come back with whatever you ordered in a in a bag. And then they would have an envelope with the cash money of cashing your check. It wasn't very long ago, having been sober 47 years, it wasn't very long ago before the light came on. I never knew if the money they gave me was correct. I never counted it. I was so anxious and excited to drink. I just took the envelope, stuck it in my pocket, hit the bottle, and started drinking. So I don't ever know if them people robbed me or stole. It just didn't occur to me. So anyway, the gentleman that brought me to you all became my sponsor. Is anybody new with us this afternoon? A sponsor is a person that can help you understand what this experience can do for you. It's not to be somebody to tell you you're doing right or you're doing wrong, but it's just somebody to help you. And I would go to him because I was confused and conflicted about what was happening in my life now that I'm not drinking. I didn't know for years that I didn't know how to be a parent. I didn't know how to be a son. I didn't know how to do any of these things because I had spent the last 15 years of my life prior to AA drinking. And my drinking got progressively worse in terms of how much I drank and the consequences. I've been in 3 automobile accidents. I've been arrested. I've humiliated my family. I've done some things that just now, when I look back, I can see how out of control and insane I was. And the biggest reason is I can see the difference in me now. I have not been in a car accident since I've been sober. I've not been arrested since I've been sober. I've been stopped about a half a dozen times for speeding, but never arrested because the officer gave me a ticket. It was a warning ticket. And I think he gave it to me because I'm sober and knew how to act like I got some sense. So when he said license and registration, I said, yes, sir, officer, here you are. And he went to check, and there were no outstanding warrants or unpaid tickets or any of that. And he would say, well, Mr. Manley, I'm going to give you a warning. Please slow down. I would say, thank you, sir, and I would drive off. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't tell you when it was, but I can tell you for sure that I'd been in AA a very long time, having convinced myself that Alcoholics Anonymous is about don't drink and go to meetings. I was absolutely convinced of that. Don't drink and go to meetings. And I was doing that successfully. Again, I've not had a drink since my very first meeting. And now, the longer I stay here, I've learned how to listen to you all in different kinds of ways. Part of how I listen is when I go to meetings, I get to see for myself the people keep showing up. There's no ifs, no ands, no buts. There's nobody on this screen here accidentally. Everybody was somewhere doing something else, and you made it possible for you to be here. I saw that commitment, although I didn't understand the power of it. Just like the people I drank with had the power of influence over me, so does the people in Alcoholics Anonymous have the power of influence in me. You give me something to look forward to, something to be excited about, because I fit now. I belong somewhere. I'm accepted. I'm able to be in places with people like most of you on this screen that I've never met before, but I'm comfortable with who I am being with you. That's a byproduct of being involved in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. If nobody gets to know you, then it keeps you isolated and lonely, even in AA. Letting people get to know you in a social way, because I didn't have any social skills, meaning how to make conversation, just to talk about things in general, how to talk to women about things other than my own selfish lust. I had to learn. No, I don't know. I didn't have to, but I got to a point in my life where I wanted to learn. In our basic text, Bill talks about having had a spiritual awakening, but Bill talks about it as a result of these steps. I personally have experienced spiritual awakening before I got to the 12th step. And I want you to know that if you might, in your own life and in your own head, if you think that you're grasping what AA is about before you get to step 12, you're not doing anything wrong. The very first thing that hit me that I understood was the second step. Ladies and gentlemen, I came to believe that Alcoholics Anonymous works because I kept seeing the people in the meetings. That's how I know AA works. It's not that I understand or agree or like all of you, but I kept seeing you and you kept showing up every day, every day, every day, every day, every time I go to a meeting, and it doesn't matter where I go. I've been to meetings as far away as Seattle, Washington. I've been to meetings in San Diego, California, uh, Vermont, New York. Been to meetings in a lot of places, and I keep seeing it, living proof that AA works. So now I got this AA don't go to meet. I mean AA don't drink, go to meetings lifestyle, and I think it's working pretty well for me. Well, my sponsor, the first one, he said to me, son, read the book. And the book that he was referring to those that might be new, the book he's referring to is what we have given the name our basic text. Now, basic to me says this is the first book of information that Bill Wilson wrote. He wrote some other books after that, but this is the first book. And this is a compilation of the early people that created Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what the book is. It's the way that Bill listened to people, communicated with people, and he took God's power, God's grace, God's tuition, and he went from being a stockbroker / speculator, stock speculator, to being and crafting himself as an author, not all by himself, but he was the lead person. And when I say all by himself, when he started to write, then he would give it to different people to edit. He'd give it to different folk to read over it to see if they agreed with it, if they thought it should be written a different way. And there's a book I have. It's called The Book That Started It All. A friend of mine gave me that. And this is the book that contains the information that how our basic text came into being. And it's a really interesting book. In particular, to me, what jumped out was the idea of them folk. Now, again, in 1935 is AA's birthday, June 10th. I think it's in the last part of Vision for You. One of the sentences says, we know only little. And the reason that they knew only little is because when the book was published in 1939, nobody in Alcoholics Anonymous had more than 4 years of sobriety. Just kind of follow that. I'm not asking you to agree with it, but nobody had more than 4 years, but they had figured out the solution to alcoholism. That's what they were excited about. There's no solution to alcohol. That's simply a liquid substance. My sponsor said, son, when you stop drinking, you stop having alcohol problems. He said, the reason that you can't stay stopped is because of alcoholism. And Alcoholics Anonymous has solved the alcoholism problem. They figured out how to manage it. And to give you the confidence to want to do it, you only have to do it today, Wednesday. You don't have to do it the rest of your life. Just today. So what is it that you do when you don't drink? And that's what they were faced with. They meaning the creators of this program. Somehow or another, ladies and gentlemen, like me, and maybe some of you all, at some point realized that not drinking and going to AA meetings was not enough. And that's what happened with the early people. They stopped drinking. Now, mind you, when I say the early people, I'm talking about, for those of us that know a little about AA's history, Bill Wilson was in Akron, Ohio on a business deal that fell through. Bill had his last drink December 1934. As a result of that spiritual experience he had while he was in the hospital for the last time, he knew something in him changed, just like I did. I knew something in me changed after my first meeting, but I couldn't describe what it was because I'd never had that experience before. But Bill knew after that deal fell through in Akron, his instincts, his tuition, he knew he had to find somebody like him to talk to. And when he got back to the hotel, it's in the book. He said he looked down the hall at the bar and he could hear the ice in the glass and the conviviality that was going on down there. And then he looked down the other end of the hall and there was a phone booth. I'm convinced that it was the loving God that had spared his life and ours that he went to that phone booth. And when he put his nickel in there, didn't get nobody. Put his nickel in there, didn't get nobody. Ladies and gentlemen, he kept trying until he got somebody that knew somebody that got him to Dr. Barr. And as a result of which, here we are today. almost 89 years later, here you two men that don't know each other. They both have a history of not being able to leave drinking alone. And after I understood that, I could look back at my life. Now, there was never a time where I wanted to stop drinking, but there's a couple of times where I tried to slow down before my mother. She was very concerned that I was going to kill myself drinking and driving. She's really concerned. She might even be concerned I was going to kill somebody else. But the point being, how all of this came into being. So Bill eventually met Dr. Bob, and somewhere in our book we got this thing. They eventually entitled a book, "The Language of the Heart," and that's what Dr. Bob recognized as he was listening to Bill. Says something different about this guy. He's talking to me about what drinking had done to him, but then he had this spiritual experience, and not only he hasn't had a drink in a few months, but he needs to talk to somebody. And here he is in my living room talking to me. And these are Dr. Bob's thoughts. Like, wow. And it went from an awkward situation to a kinship, to a relationship. And I think the story says that they talked about 6 hours. And Bill Wilson ended up staying in Akron about 4 or 5 weeks. And they were clear about what it is that they recognized in each other. And I eventually became clear about what was happening in me. Now, when you hear me say I was clear, please understand I'm talking 25, 30 years of before it became clear. The drinking part, no problem at all. I have not had a drink, nor have I wanted one. So I've never been tempted, never had any fantasy about ever going back to drinking and safely and all of that crap. Something in me changed that Saturday morning until today. So y'all kept talking about this program. My sponsor kept talking about this book. Y'all kept talking about this program. My sponsor kept talking about this book. So I eventually got around to letting somebody help me read. And as I started to read the book, my whole outlook on AA has changed. That psychic change that Bill talks about, it keeps happening. And part of what excites me about opportunities like this is I keep getting different understandings of what was going on. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have heard this before, so I made this up myself. All right. When Bill and Bob met, and June 10th ended up being AA's birthday, Bill Wilson died on January 24th, 1971. So from 35 to 71 is what I have coined the first generation of fellowship. The first generation of fellowship. The book was published in 1939. Now think about this carefully. This is what's hitting me during my meditation. They met in 35. So somewhere between the rest of 35, 36, 37, 38, somewhere in that time frame, a few people in New York, a few people in Akron, Ohio, a few people in Cleveland, Ohio, with their means of communication was telephone and longhand writing, they put together the information in the book. They solved the problem with alcoholism. They solved the problem of alcoholism. And they knew they had solved it. And Bill said in the foreword to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is why they wrote the book, to share it with us. They had it. They didn't have to write a book to share it with anybody. They could have kept it among themselves. And that, again, I don't want y'all to be too disturbed, but you can't talk about AA and not talk about God. I don't care whether you believe or not. And for those of you that think you don't believe, look at the screen and listen to the people talk about how grateful we are that God has spared our lives. Everybody don't get this. And God decided he wanted me to have it. And he also decided he wanted y'all to be here when I got here to be a living example of his grace and mercy. So in the book, they wrote what their experiences were in the first 3.5 years. They had it, once they had it down, then the struggle and the problem was how they gonna get the book published? The information was here. How they gonna get it published? And there's a book called The Language of the Heart. And Bill Wilson explains to all who are interested all that he went through to create what I call the literature that we can read and understand and follow. But in chapter 5 of this book, here's the thing that just really got me excited here lately. In chapter 5, Bill says, if you want what we have, they had the formula for alcoholism. If you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get what we got, then you are ready to take certain steps. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been in AA 35 years before I understood that. I've been hearing it over and over and over and over, never tried to understand it. It never made any sense to me until maybe 8 or 10 years ago, and then it clicked. And when I say click, I'm talking about me having a spiritual awakening. Oh, well, wait a minute. If I want what they have, what did they have in 1935, 36, 37, 38? What did they have back then? What do I remember? What do I think I know? What do I understand about America in 1935, 36, 37, 38? They had the formula. Well, what was the formula? Here are the steps we took. I swear this makes sense to me. Here are the steps we took that we found to be the solution for alcoholism. There is no solution for drinking. Ladies and gentlemen, they still make this crap. People still drink this crap. People still dying from it. But then here we are. So the solution is the steps. That's what they said. Here are the steps we took. Now, you don't have to take them, just like I didn't for the first 35 years. I ain't take no steps. I was just sitting in the meeting listening to y'all talk about it, but I didn't apply it. I was not willing to give myself to this simple program. I've been willing to give myself to the fellowship since day one. I've been a happy AA go to meetings guy since day one, bragging about how AA done changed my life and how much better I'm doing, all of that, without the program of recovery. So you might ask yourself, well, if you don't drink and go to meetings and your life get better, what's the point of the program? That's part of what my head was going through. What's the point? Well, now I can tell you how the program of recovery has changed me inside, has given me faith that I never had before, given me a whole attitude and a host of friends. I mean, I'm not talking about the people that you got $2 to get a drink. I ain't talking about them kind of friends. I ain't talking about them no more. I'm talking about people that are there for me. So here are the steps we took. Like they're talking about them first folks. They took these steps and they worked for them. They took the steps. Well, what are these steps again? First, you had to admit that you were powerless. And then Bill goes on to talk about that some of us, not all, but some of us seem, all right, we're hopeless state of mind and body. Well, I wasn't in a hopeless state of mind and body the way that it's written. I can see now that I was hopeless to leave drinking alone and have a better life. I can see that now because of a spiritual awakening. Not just coming to the meetings. The meetings have to have purpose other than just don't drink. They discovered it then. I'm discovering it now. There has to be purpose. There has to be a reason. Drinking is not my problem. It hasn't been since day one. I hear people today say, well, you got to go to meetings or you're going to drink. I do not believe that. I don't think God has given me this opportunity to have this way of life. I don't believe God has given you all the power to show me that He exists and AA works to live scared. When I hear people talk about relapse, invariably what they've conditioned themselves to believe is that they relapse because they stopped going to meetings. I've never heard somebody say that they were practicing these principles in all their affairs and relapsed. So to me, it's an entirely different way of understanding alcoholism. So if you don't go to meetings and you're not practicing these principles, you have disconnected from the power. Let me tell it. So I stay connected through prayer and meditation, through attending meetings, and trying to do this in my life. Well, what is the this that I'm trying to do? Well, even though I didn't understand powerless, after I'd been here a while, I did understand I couldn't leave drinking alone. I got that down real clear. And that had to do with the fact I was able to look back at my history and see it. I couldn't leave it alone. I tried to I've tried to appease my mother, but I just wasn't able to do it. But I've been here long enough, even early on, seeing you all convinced me that you all had something. And I believe you all when you tell me that your life gets better as a result of don't drink, go to meetings, practicing these principles in all your affairs. And I had to add that last piece because for years I was stuck on the don't drink and go to meetings. But now that I've given myself to this simple program, I see the whole thing differently now. So I decided, oh, I don't know how many years ago, I decided that I was going to stay with you all. Now, I'd been coming to meetings for years, but I hadn't made a conscious decision. I was in a meeting one time, and the voice in my head said, Lee, stay with these people. I didn't know anything about turning my will and my life over, but I knew there was something different about being with you all. So that's what I've done. I've committed myself to be with you all. Inventory, my sponsor said, is an opportunity, son, to look at what's going on with you now that you don't drink anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't drink, go to meetings, and I was complaining about everything and everybody because something seeped into me that because I don't drink and go to meetings, that I'm entitled to have my way. And that kept me living angry and hurt and confused because I couldn't understand if I don't drink and go to meetings, if I go to work on time, if I pay my bills, if I'm doing all of this right stuff, how come I can't have my way? And every time I got rejected, I got dejected, anytime, then I get angry and I take the anger out on anybody that happened to be close to me. So I'm looking at these things and I'm thinking about them differently. And I'm feeling better when I have an opportunity to talk with a new person. What Dr. Bob did, soon as he got a new person, he immediately went to the program. That's what the first generation did. If nobody told you, the first generation, after this book was published, the purpose of AA meetings was to study the information in the book. That's why they wrote the book. They didn't write the book to go to meetings to talk about being drunk. I get it now. I didn't get it then because I wasn't trying to learn. Well, now I'm trying to learn and I'm understanding it entirely different. And I'm really excited about it because I've gotten to be this old. And I swear I ain't never, I, I ain't never think I get to be this old and living this good. My health is not bad for a man of my years. It's just so different than how I saw myself in the beginning and in the middle. All right. I have been sober 47 years, 6 months, and 7 days. That's how long I've been a part of this experience. And I keep growing in here. So when I have a chance to talk to a new person, like Dr. Bob, I tell them about the program. And when they ask me, well, dang, man, you've been sober 47 years and you still go to meetings? I said, I sure do. He said, well, if AA work, why you keep going to meetings? I said, I'm glad you asked. Number one, I attend meetings on a regular basis out of a sense of duty. Number two, I enjoy the pleasure of your company. Number three, today, being in a meeting puts insurance on my sobriety. And number four, in 1976, there was somebody there for me when I got there. Ladies and gentlemen, you all are there for me today when I got here. Outside of Glenn and a couple of the people that came along with me today, nobody in this meeting knew I was coming to this meeting today, but I knew y'all were going to be here. That's the first tradition of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Glenn, I think my time is up. I want to thank you for the opportunity. I want to thank y'all for showing up for me like you do and tell you how glad I am to see you. Look forward to seeing you at different meetings in different places because that's kind of what my life is all about.